welcome everyone to day 8 of the C Bootcamp, organized by the Creators Garage with the motto of Team, Together Everyone Achieves More. It's a great pleasure for me to introduce our speaker today, Mr. Arup. He is a student, teacher, tech enthusiast, ambassador, creative thinker with an innovative mindset, and has a command in various programming and scripting languages. Today we are going to cover input-output functions, file opening, and reading. We will be taking up the questions in the last 10 minutes of the session. You are advised to share the full screen to ensure the smooth flow of the session. Please fill the feedback form and attempt the quiz in order to receive the completion certificate. You all will be provided with the notes and study material at the end of the session. Read the rules and regulations mentioned in the chat box. You are requested to maintain the decorum. Any kind of wrong behavior will not be tolerated and the person committing it will be no longer part of the bootcamp. Sir, please take over and teach us. Happy learning, everyone.
Thank you, Alaika, and good evening, everyone. I hope everybody is doing well and is taking care of yourself. Uh, Hopefully, lockdown is about to get over, so I hope you all would go out and you know come to a place where you can enjoy yourself as before. So, good wishes for that as well. I do that in every event whenever possible because that's really the need of the time. Okay, so let's get started with today's topic. I'll share my screen. Let me know if it's visible. Okay. Can anyone of
Yes,
you
sir, it's
confirm?
visible.
Okay. And is my audio okay?
Yes,
Yes.
sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you. So today's topic, day 8 of this boot camp. You guys have been following it for a long, almost 1 week done, and we are into the next week. Okay. And we are almost on the last topic of this boot camp, I guess. If there are no changes in the plan as suggested by the team. So today we'll be covering input output functions. The one of the part of C which is actually it is something that you may not use as a student. Maybe it depends what kind of programming you're doing, but this is one of the essential aspects when it comes to software programming. In the industry, people use it along. Now, why they use it, we'll come across that, and we'll keep the session as much as interactive as possible, like we did the last time. So let's get started. Okay, so when we say input and output, what comes to our mind is when I say input, I am putting something, I'm feeding something into the program, or in general terminology, if we say, you're just feeding something, or you're giving giving some response, reaction to something, right? As an input, that's what is happening, right? In input, and in output you're just taking, right? You're absorbing what is being given to you, right? So that's what output is, and the same happens with the programming languages as well. You're giving certain inputs and output, right? But did you ever imagine where does this input and output go, right? The moment you enter some value into the screen, right, you input some value, right, and you just press enter, and then there is a result that comes out. So the moment you enter, there is an output coming out. So what's there in between the input and output? Where is this value that you typed? Where did it go, behind the scenes? What happened to that value, right? So all that, it's essential to know, because when you're dealing with C language, you have this power, this benefit of in C, that you can control almost every aspect of whatever you're entering, whatever character you're trying to use, whatever kind of data type you're using, to get some value, right, and the functions. So one of the beautiful features of C language is this, that you can handle things according to what you want. And this is the one of the most beautiful features, that you can handle your files in the way you want. Now, how do we handle this file, and why do we need it? Okay, and what is the requirement of input output functions? So I want you to think once, right? As I said, input and output mean, what does they mean, and how do they value, what is the value of these two things in C? So can any one of you guess, just like a guess, why is file handling required in C? Why do we need it? Like, what was the requirement to give the birth of this topic? File handling in C. We were good with. We already have done, I think, the main topics that have been covered in last 1 week, where you are studying pointers, characters, data types, all the essential basic fundamentals of C that you needed to program, then what is the use of file handling? Why do we need it? Anyone from the
So
audience?
it stores the information, and when we need the information, we can generate the after running the program,
Okay, that's okay.
plugging the
That's
data.
yeah, yeah. That's one answer we can consider. Like anyone else with some answer that gives overall file handling. This is storing part of file handling. Right. When I say file handling, there's a lot of aspect. Right. You're inputting, you're storing, you're taking output. Right. And then you're doing certain function between the storing and output. So I want an overall overview and answer. Why do we need file handling other than just storing? Obviously, that's one aspect. Anyone from the audience, just give it a try. I mean, you are here to listen, so it's good to interact, even if it's wrong, doesn't matter. Anyone, just give it a
Uh,
guess.
if you want to like translate a file, so you need to read the text from it.
Yeah, okay, that's also something we can consider in file handling. Yes, like I want you to think beyond that. What can be the reason why you're using input output? The hint is input output, right? So you're talking between input and output, that is storing, right? So when I'm saying input, output, storing, all these things combined uh, to form file handling, right? When you want to handle, you want to give input, you want to take output, you want to store, and you want to do certain things with that storage. How do we store it? Like, there's the concept of memory. A lot of times the memory thing comes in C, so how does that happen? You want your code to be as fast as possible. When you're dealing with a lot of huge code, you want it to, you want the output to be as fast as possible. So let's understand why do we need it, right? So the moment you are in C, you are usually using the prompt of the terminal, right? You're seeing the values on the terminal. You are seeing the value. You're giving the input on the terminal, right? But then there are aspects where you want the output to be stored, right, somewhere. The moment you input something, for example, you're inputting some value, right? So you want that value to be stored somewhere in certain manner, right? You cannot just store it randomly anywhere and just call it later on. That doesn't happen. There's a structure of working that goes on behind the scene. How does it happen, and how do you get an access to that part of C programming, right? That's why we needed file handling, right? Because right now we are dealing with small codes maybe, but the moment you get into organization where companies are dealing with a lot of huge long codes, and there you need to efficiently store the values, and that's where you need the input and output feature of file handling, right? So that we'll be discussing today. This is the main reason why we needed file handling. Okay, so then the moment you start a C programming program, what happens, right? Three standard files, are made behind the scene. The moment you start, right? What are the three main standard files that are going to be formed? Are basically the stdin, the file, the standard input file, the standard output file, and the error file, right? Because you will be giving certain input. We cannot store it in the output file, right? If you give an input, I cannot store it in the output file and make one file. Okay, let's save some memory and let's make one file. In that only we'll keep input, we'll keep output, and we'll keep the error also. So that won't happen, right? Because the system doesn't use the memory in that way, right? So we need these three files, and so we came up with this concept of file handling. And so the three files are created the moment you start, right? Now before I move to this part where I will talk about the three file pointers that as you can see in the screen, let's talk about how we are going to open this entire file handling session today, right? So file handling, as you guys said, right, you want to change certain thing, you want to create something, like few of you answered, right, that you want to store something, right? So how do we do it, right? The first important thing is you create the various steps that are there in file handling. Is first you create. And how do you create? That you use certain functions that we'll see today. What are those functions? There are certain modes in that function as well. You may not have seen modes before in the function, or may have seen, I'm not sure, but today we're going to see certain modes that are there in the function that we're using, right? So one function has multiple modes, right? This sounds like certain kind of Iron Man, Superman concept, where you have different modes where you can change your mode, right? So this is for the first concept where it comes. You create file, then you open a file, and then you have different function for doing all this thing: reading the file, writing, moving it to a specific location, then closing it, obviously. So today, what we'll be covering is we'll be creating, opening, reading. We'll see a little bit of writing part as well, and the rest part will be covered tomorrow because it is a little bit of huge topic, and we don't want to, keep using a lot of, open functions with keyword open are going to come up today. So open and get, okay. So in the process of using a lot of get function, it should not end up that you do not get any concept, right? So we'll try to keep it as concise as possible so that it's easier for you to remember things, because the terminologies are similar and are confusing. Like when we go, you'll see. Okay. Okay, now let's come to this part where I was talking about standard input, standard output, standard error, right? These are the three files that are made when you, the moment you start a C program and you start running it. Okay, so can anybody tell me what is a file pointer before I get into what file pointer from my side? I want to hear. You have, I think, studied pointers, so you can guess. Anyone?
Say address the file.
To address, you want me? You mean to give it an address? Right? Or is it something else? Don't worry, even if it's wrong. I mean, we are here to do hit and trials, no issues. Anyone? Just give it a try. File pointers you have studied. There's a keyword file that's in front of that. So pointers relating to file. Anyone? Just give it a try. Uh, it's always good to interact. Just listening will make it boring.
One of the participants says to store or point a file.
Who stores and points the file? Okay, yeah, that is also an answer to this. Anyone else? But the question is, do pointers store anything? This is something we need to think. Anyone give it a try? I mean, don't hesitate. Okay, so file pointer, when you say pointer, simply as an English term, states that you're pointing to something, right? You're tracking something, right? So the moment you're saying these three files are made, you'll have separate pointers as well, because I need somebody to actually go and track this file, handle these files behind the scene. If I don't have a pointer, how is somebody going to take that message that you typed on the screen as an input and store it into the standard input file, right? That was generated. So we need this pointers in that regard. And so the three pointers would be created the moment you create these three files, right? So the stdin, which is the standard input file, is basically used for the keyboard. The moment you type or any kind of input device that you're using, for that, this pointer is going to keep a record. So the moment you type something on the keyboard or any kind of input device, this pointer gets active, and it tracks the movement that you're doing, right? And then similarly, stdi out, which is for the screen or any kind of output device, and then your error function, right? Any kind of error that you're doing, that also needs to come on. And now the question is, error is also kind of output. You see the error on the screen, right? You don't input an error, so it's also kind of output. But we need a separate pointer, because if you mix output and input, you won't understand what was your result, right? So we have this two different categories in output as well, which is the standard output and the standard error, right? Okay, let's move to the next part. Yeah, now input and output is something that you covered on the first day, I think, of this boot camp, where you were told about this scanf and printf function, right? And you were pretty confident what happens when you use scanf and printf, right? So can anybody recall what was scanf and printf?
Scanf to take the input from the user, and
Yes.
printf to print the value after taking the input from the user.
Yeah, very correct. So this is one kind of input output function, right? But we have other various input output function in C as well, but the mostly uses scanf and printf, right? So as I said, we usually don't deal with a lot of file handling thing as students, at least. So you may not be, very much confident with the other input and output functions. So we'll try to cover them as well today. So the first that we see is the get char and the put char function. As the name suggests, get char function is basically getting the character, right, and put char function is basically putting the function. Now the question is, there may be slightly difference in the scanf and get char, because all of them are taking an input and output, right? So you'll see mostly you'll rarely be able to distinguish any difference, because this is something that's going on behind the scenes. But it's important to understand when you're dealing specifically with characters, so you're getting get character and put character, okay? And then we have something called gets and puts. So as I said in the beginning, we're going to use a lot of gets today in this session. So I hope you don't miss out on the main topics in this process of getting confused with the gets, right? So let's see what these functions are doing and what they actually do. Okay, let's move to the code part. Okay, so I have a small example code because we have a lot of code, so I've built them before, and what we'll try to do is we'll just try to guess what kind of uh, output is going to come, right? So what I'm trying to do is simply defining a character C, and then using this get char function to get the character from the C, right? And then I try to print it, right? So let's see what happens. Okay, so I'm getting an error which says put char is not recognized as an internal external command. Okay, let's do one thing. We can just run this on some other file because this is inside a folder, so maybe this is giving an issue. Run.c, just mistyped it. It says me to enter some character, so let's enter some character, right? So the moment it asks me to enter some character, this line has been printed, and now whatever I enter would go into this get char function, which is going to trying to get this character, whatever I will try, right? So I said, yep, it's a good session going. Okay. So I see this only Y comes out, the rest of the thing doesn't come. Now this is because the get char function just tries to read the first character, right? Now when I say character, and there is something called string, right? So can anybody tell me what's the difference between a character and string? Why I just got one Y, whereas I typed a huge sentence here. Sorry.
The character is a single letter, and the string is the collection of characters.
Yeah, so that's why this thing where you got only Y, because you're just trying to get a character, and character will only get, it will just take one character. Okay, so this function is also taking one character, and character simply means you have one single character. I have not taken it as a string, so it's not printing the entire thing, right? So this is how we got this. There are slight differences between scanf, printf, get, char, these input functions, right? Now let's see what is happening on the next category of input output function, right? Any doubts here? It's not very difficult, and just try to remember the differences that are there. Okay, don't get confused with that. Okay, so we have gets and puts. Let's see what happens in gets and puts. Gets and puts. Okay. Okay, again I need to print something. So okay, procession. Can anybody guess what will be the result in this case?
It will come the whole letter, sir. The session is running.
You mean the entire sentence, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, let's see what is coming in that case. Yeah, so it gave the entire output. So can you tell me why did this happen? Although I have already
Because
given a hint.
at first you were using the char character, and that's why it was only giving the first letter.
Yeah.
Because character is the single letter. But here you are using the string gets. That's why it is you giving the full sentence.
Yes. So these are slight differences that are there, and you can easily remember from the name itself. Just the moment you are seeing the function, I mean, I suggest this to everybody whenever you're trying to learn any kind of concept and see the name of the function itself are, in a manner where you can directly, remember what's happening inside. Just the moment is you need to just need to remember the concept, the basic fundamental concept. Just as I said, you need to understand what is the difference between string and characters. If someone is not clear with that, so we won't be able to remember. So just try to, cover up those fundamental beginning things in the C, and I think at the end, when you're here in the file handling part, it won't be anything very difficult. It'll sound very easy to you. Okay, so let's move to the next part. Scanf and printf, I think you have already done on the first day, so I won't be repeating. You saw the differences, right? So let's move to the next part. Okay. Now we move to this input output functions, and we have a bunch of function that we're going to see and what is the difference between them. Now, how is it different from the one that we covered previously? Right? These are also functions, these are also functions. Now, this is kind of, uh, you're dealing with, characters and strings, data types. Here you're dealing with the file, entire file. You see every function is dealing with the file at the end. Do you see? So when it comes to the entire file, we need special functions which, deals with the entire file. As I said, we have pointers at the back which are working, which are actually tracking and handling every action that you're trying to do. And that is why this language, C language, is a beautiful language, because again, as I say, you can handle almost every aspect in this language. So it's also one of the most famous language in embedded industry, I guess. So if you are a student from electronics, you are from you're somewhere someone who are from core industry, this language is really useful to you. And obviously software engineers are always there who are building softwares on C language. So that's where these concepts are going to come into play, the input output functions. And that's why I'm saying that please try to listen to the differences today. The differences are very important, not the concept, because the concepts are very easy. I'll tell the simple tricks how to remember simply with the name, right? So if you see this table, I hope every one of you is with me, and you can see the differences. So the first function that is there is f print f, right? And then the f scanf. So let's discuss the first two functions, because today we are not covering the writing part, as I said in the beginning, which is next day, which is tomorrow. So the right part will be covered there, but I'll give a little bit of, a brief, just a little bit of brief from the top, so that you get an idea what's actually happening. Okay. So what will happen in term when we say s scanf? Okay. So we'll, before we jump into scanfs, there's something that we're missing, and I discussed that in the beginning of uh, file handling. So can anyone of you think and try to recall, there is some function that we're trying to forget here? Before we print, before we scan, before we write or read anything, there is one step that we do. So can anyone of you guess what is that step? Like, just a wild guess. What do you do before input and output? Because these are all our input and output functions.
So we assign the values before input and output.
Okay, you assign a value. Okay. Anyone else? You can take a minute. We have no hurry, and you can think. The simple hint is something that comes before input and output, because these are input and output functions. What do
Creation
you,
of a file.
creation of a file? Okay. Anyone else?
Statements. Conditional
Statements.
statements.
Statements, conditions. Okay. So we have answer, statement, conditions, creating a file, and somebody said storing some values. Okay. Any other answer? Just give it a try. Your answer can be same, not an issue. Okay. So someone said that we will be creating a file, right? That's the first thing that you do. So you create a file, and then you start storing, you start using conditional, you start writing statements, right? Until unless you've not created something, how will you input or how will you assign something, right? So this is uh, the first fundamental thing that comes into place. So we'll jump to the first function that opens a file, right? Which is not there in this, but we'll try to see how it works. Okay, let's jump to the code. Okay, so the function name is fopen. Okay, and what it does is, okay, I'll tell you a simple way to remember this first, and then we'll move because it'll be easier for you to understand the code. So the moment you see f written somewhere, it's an easier way to remember that it's related to file. Okay, although everything is related to file here, but specifically inside file, what we are going to do, that it'll tell. So when I say f, you can remember this as data. You're writing data, you're not writing any other thing, you're just writing the data. Now data can be any kind of data, right? It can be I mean, depends on what kind of data type you're using, right? So that would come in f categories of input and output, uh, you know functions. And remember that f should be in the beginning. Okay, so printf, you already used f has come in front. So this is one way to remember this. And then the moment you get into put and get, now put is again similar to the f printf, but the moment you see c at the end, right? You see both here c and c, it means it's putting or it's writing character in a file, right? And same with the get means read. So getting is reading, putting is writing, right? So just don't get mingled with this terminologies, get and put. Again, put w. So w here is basically like a whole number. You can remember w means whole, so number. So you can make synonym this way, and you can remember these functions because they are similar. You see here also there is put, here also there is put. So the moment you get into coding, you will be confusing that am I using put c, am I using put w, right? So the best way to remember is the at the last and at the first. So, and in the front, you won't have a lot. Only I think one or two are there. Only this one is there where you have f in the front. Rest all you can remember by the last character, not from the first, last. Only in this case you have you have to remember from the first letter, and the rest you can remember from the last alphabet. So put w and get w is for, as I said, whole number you can remember. Not necessarily it should be a whole number. It can be an integer as well, but just for memory purpose. And then we go to f puts, right? So you see that last is s, so it will be a string, and we are very much familiar with %s in C, which is actually storing s, right? So s would be the denotion for remembering string, writing string into file, and reading string into file. Okay. Then here comes f read and f write. Again, it's entirely out of the world, a different function from all of these. It's not like get and put, because it's entirely different. You just have to read the entire document and you have to write the entire document. So you can make a little bit of smaller synonyms or methodologies to remember, because as I said, today's session is more about uh, getting the differences between these, because all of them are input and output, and there are so many input and output functions. Okay, so let's jump to the code part of how to open a file, and let's see what's happening. Okay, so the code is very simple. I want to keep it simple because again the terminologies are same. So okay, let's start, and we'll increase the level slow one by one once we open, and then we start reading and writing. Okay, so what here I'm doing is, okay, let me show the let me tell you the syntax first, what's happening and how do you write an f open function. Okay, and what are the modes that I was telling you, right? So when you say f open, just give me a second. Yeah, here we are. So f open, you will have first the file name. Okay, now I don't think you have used files before in your code, where you are using or importing a different file, which can be a text file, which can be a c file, or any kind of file which has some kind of information in it, and you're importing that in between the code. Is that something you have done before? Any one of you can confirm? Anyone from the audience? Is have you used a file internally inside of another C file? Have you done something like that before? Okay, so I guess I assume that it's a no because I'm not getting any answer. So let's see what happens when it comes to opening a file using using a file extension or location to open a new file, right? So what I'm doing here is I'll write the syntax. This is the syntax that you need to remember when it comes to fopen. So you write a file, and then this is the exact syntax. You write it in capital file, and then use this pointer, and then you write this function. And what you write inside this function is a file name. Okay, any file name, as I said, it can be of any type. It can be a text file, it can be a C file. And then what you do is you declare the mode. Okay, so the different modes that are there in opening a file. Okay, there are actually more than five modes where you can open the file in different modes. So we'll see that. Okay, so what does file path do is you just give the first argument that you pass over here, right, is the file path. So wherever you have stored it, there you will just write, and then you'll pass the mode. Okay, let's see what is the difference. So here, if you see, I am using the file function, as I said, file, and then the pointer fp. Fp is simply the character in which I'm going to store the file, and I'm going to call it later. Okay, so the file that I'm using is file name.txt, and I've stored it over here. I've not stored it here. I'll tell you, it's not there, but it'll come up. So I'm using something called W. Now this is the mode that I'm using to open this file. Now what does W mean? Okay, let's see. So we have, as I said, 5 to 6 modes where you can open the file in different categories. Okay, so when I use R as my mode, I'm opening the existing text file. So it means there is a file that's there, and I just need to open and read it simply. When I say W, I'm opening a text file for writing, and if the file doesn't exist, it will create. Okay, so this is the terminology. A means appending the file. I mean, it's if it's there, it will append, and if it doesn't there, then it'll create. Okay, and then R plus is like opening and writing. Like you do both the things simultaneously. Just don't read. Like unlike here, you just open. Here you just read and write. Both the things you can do. Similarly, W plus means you are reading, writing, and if the file is not there, you what you do is you make, and if the file is there, you make it blank. Okay, we'll see the applications in the code how they are functioning. And then A plus is again appending and simultaneously reading the file, if and they create the file if it doesn't exist. And what it'll do is it'll start reading from the beginning, and the writing can be appended at the end. Okay, so this is how the different modes are there in fopen. So you need to take care of this. A lot of times what will happen is I'll show you the errors which you will encounter while making this fopen file. Is usually what you will do is you will write here R, and you would be looking for writing something, and later on you find out, okay, I just missed the mode. Okay, that will happen a lot of time. Maybe today we'll try to make that mistake and see what happens. Okay, so let's run and see what happens, or you can give it a guess what will happen. Anyone?
So it will come a file where you can write a document to create a
Yeah,
file.
yeah. Okay, what is it saying? CD is not recognized as an internal or external operable file or patch file. The session is running. Okay, so I think the same issue as we saw in the previous one. Let's try to run it. Or do we have this file already? Okay, we already have this file, so that is why it's showing an error. So this is how it will give, or it will make a file just for writing purpose. So you can write anything and then it will start. So this is one mode. Okay, and then what we'll do is we'll move to the next functions, and then we'll see the different modes are open in that only. I'll not separately do it, because then it just will increase the same thing and it will make it boring. Okay, so we're now moving to the scanf function. Just give me a second. Yeah, okay. So we're now into this fscanf function. So what will the fscanf function do? Anyone, can you guess? I've already discussed this, so it won't be a difficult thing. I just want to make it a little bit interactive, guys. Just
So
speak
for
up.
file, it is
Get
used
the
for
input
files.
from a file.
One of you, I didn't get.
It is used to take the input for the file, sir.
Okay, that even scanf does. What is the difference between then scanf and fscanf?
It is specifically for file.
Specifically for file. Okay, huh? That can be one difference. Any other difference? Try to think from that name, as I said. Try to remember through the name. What does happen when you say file? Okay, so the difference is not too much. The simple difference is that you're initiating a file, right? As I show you in the code last time, you first initiated a file with txt extension, and then you were scanning it, right? So in scanf, we never used to give a file, like I show you once again. Like for example, open here, I'm giving file name .txt, right? So I've given this, and then I'll try to scan that instead of without giving a text. I used to scan in scanf, right? So this is the difference that's going to be there in fscanf. And what is going to happen when I am going to put a file? So fscanf will see for any formatted input in that file. So that is what it is going to do, instead of just looking for what's there inside that, if there is any format. So imagine you have a lot of big code, and you just simultaneously everyday code, and you have certain changes that you make to that file, right? And because it's a huge code, you're using a lot of functions. You may not end up remembering what was the input. So you want to see the you may not remember the differences that you made yesterday and today while coding. So there, this function can come into use, and this is why IT industry, or you can say the software makers or software developers, they would specifically prefer it, because you want to track the differences that are there, the changes that you made, the formatting that you did to the file, right? Let's see the working of this. So the syntax is simple. You give a file pointer, like we saw the previous time there was a file uh, keyword that was used, and then there will be a key string, as you see. This you have been using since the starting, I guess. And then the variable list. Okay, so let's see the code. Fscan fc. Okay, so before I run the code, let's guess what can be the output in this case. So I'll go line by line, and you guys have to guess at then what is the code all about. And I'll show you some uh, a different kind of error that you can encounter while doing this thing. Okay, because the concepts are very simple, they're not very complicated, but the important thing is the errors, right? Okay, so what I'm doing is, initially I am taking two character string values with size 10, and yeah, both of them 10, and then I'm taking an integer value yr. And then, as I said, I'll take this syntax. This is which is common in almost every kind of input and output file that we are going to see today. So just you can just learn this part. It's going to be very important, and you can name it. Right now, I've named it file name. You can name it anything else according to your wish. And then what I'm doing is I'm opening a file anything.c. So it will make a file anything.c. Uh, and then what it'll do is it'll put f puts, because the writing part is not going to be covered today. So I'll just give you an overview. Put is going to simply put the values which is mentioned here will come to into file name, right? And then rewind the file. Rewind, we're using rewind function here because the moment you write it, you need to take the pointer to the beginning place. So for that, you need to use the rewind function, right? Now, not necessarily that you use rewind function, but because you're dealing with the files that are there behind, you may not see, right? So you need to use these functions, right? Because you cannot see the pointer exactly where it is, right? So that's why using the rewind function. And then we'll go to the scanf part, where we are scanning the same function that we're trying to see today, right? So the strings are going to be entered in this format, whatever this is a string character in the year, and it's going to enter, right? Now there is one mistake that I have done while speaking that entire code. Can you identify that? Or you can just guess the output. Even that will give the correct answer. Don't get confused with the printf part. What is happening here? Just need to see this part. This is the main part. Can you tell what will happen? Or I'll show you anything.c if it's there. Okay, there it is. So yeah, I have written a simple code of hello world, right, in anything's in .c. So I want you to guess what is going to happen the moment I run it. See, don't confuse, because there are not a lot of aspects. One is the mode, one is the inputting of the file, and then you're putting the file, and you don't have to worry about what's happening inside this because it's neither of the concern today, because it's not a concept today. So you can skip this part as well. Rewind, as I've already told. What is important is this line, line number 10 and line number 7. There's
Sir,
something that's
line number 7, it will help us to read and write the inside the file. We can read the file, what is written inside the file, and also we can text the file.
okay.
And in line number 10, we can open up, we can take an input of a file, sir.
Okay, you're still missing one main element that I'm looking for. Anyone else? Or you can try again. Not an issue. Okay. Now, this was what I wanted to show you, that this is where you'll get confused. I said W is for writing the function, and what you did is you said it's used for writing and reading, which is actually correct. But W plus means if there is something in the file, it will erase it, right? So I have already written something in the file. So this is going to erase this part, and it's going to write the new code that I want to write it. So what it'll do is it'll write whatever I'm trying to give it, right? I'm trying to put welcome to, so it should print welcome to. Okay, let's see what happened to this file. Okay, anything.c. Okay, so it removed welcome, it removed the previous code, and it got welcome to, right? So this is where I was saying, this is where you will miss the concept, guys. So just take care of these small things. The concept isn't very difficult, it's very easy. The mistakes, the small silly mistake is what we make. The code, the moment the code will get bigger, you'll try to understand that. Okay, let's move to the get C function. I'll try to cover because I think we're running out of time. I've stretched a little bit. Okay, never mind. Anyone again get C? I've already discussed
So for the,
quickly.
it is used for the character, sir, for getting the character input.
Yeah, getting the character, and the syntax is simple. Get C, you already said it's a character, so you just have to tell the data type that it's a character, and then it goes on with the file syntax keyword that I said you have to remember this in every input output function. So don't forget that. Okay, let's see the code of this. Okay, f get c.c. Okay, what I'm trying to do is, as I said, we'll increase the momentum of the code difficulty as we move on. Uh, so what I'm trying to do is, as the first line indicates, as I said, so the moment you are using the input and output functions, write this line. Well, it should be there in your mind the moment you start coding, right? That this line has to be there in the front. Now I've named it FP. You can name anything. And what I'm trying to do is here I'm simply reading this file. So it means this file should exist. It will not make a file. When I have put the mode R, it will uh, read this file, so it should exist. Okay, and then what I'm trying to see is if this file is null, if it will check, because this is a relational operator that we covered, so it'll check whether it's null or not, and then accordingly it will show the error, right? This is the function that we discussed initially for the errors, right? And then return the state. And what it'll do is get C, as one of you said, that it will get the characters. So it'll get the characters, and the next function is FOEF. EOF is basically end of the file. So the moment it will go to the end of the file, break, and it will come out. Okay. Now you usually don't do this in scanf and printf, right? You don't tell the compiler to go to the end of the file, and the moment you get into the end of the file, you break it, right? But you tell all these things when you're dealing with specifically these kind of function which uses F in the beginning, right? So these are the minor differences that you need to keep when you're using these functions. Let's run it. Okay, so it says we are in 2012. So maybe I've written this there. Let's check what is written in that file. My file.txt. Yeah, so I've written VR in 2012. So it printed the character, which was whatever was there inside, instead of just printing, the number. Okay. Okay. Let's move to the next part. I have no. I hope you don't have any doubts. If you have, you can just let me know. Okay. Okay. Get W. See, I said a lot of get we are going to use. So again, the point of confusions are going to be there. Now, can anybody tell me again what was get W? Try to remember that strategy that I told you to remember these functions. Anyone, guys? Get W? Okay. So I said when it comes to W, that's a number, whole number. You can remember this, right? W stands for whole number. So whole, that means it's going to print the number, right? The syntax is similar to the last one. Thus, the difference is that it's going to print the number. So let's see the code. FW. Where is FW? F get W is not there, or what? Get W is there. Okay, I think we skipped the get W function, maybe, or is it this function? Maybe I've renamed it wrong. Okay, so this is what we're using, right? F is not there in that. Yeah, see, this is where the confusion comes. Okay, let's run it. Yeah, so one of you who has been very active in between, what's your name? The one who last answered. Don't worry, I'm not going to scold you.
Sir, I answer.
Yeah, good. You're doing good job. Can you guess what's going to be the output? Just try to see. As I said, don't focus on the functions that you have not studied. Just focus on those lines that we have studied today, and try to guess. And I want others also try to, I mean, just guess what's going to be the output. Okay. So what we're doing is the first line that, as I said, you need to use, and then we are uh, uh, initiating an integer which is I, and then the same syntax. This is the line number 3 and line number 5, which is common in every document that you need to remember while using the input output functions. Then what we are doing is we are using a loop, for loop, for writing 1 to 10, and you can see here we are putting the values of I1 to the range of 1 to 10 in FP. FP is the file that I've declared, and it is now it's going to num.txt, right? So num.txt, it will write. I've used the mode write, so it will write, and it'll close. F close is basically close. So this function will come tomorrow, so nothing to worry. It just means that it is closing that file, and then what is it going to do is it will again open the file. It will now read, because you have written, now you need to read it so that it prints the same on the screen, right? So it will print this. It will get the values from the file that you have now written, right? Initially you had put, now you need to get. So put and get. Let's run. So yeah, so you already run. So what it's doing is printing the simply the values from 1 to 10, right? Okay, so that's the code part. Let's move to the next one. See guys, if you have any doubt, let me know, because I'm running out of the time, so I need to be a little bit faster here. Okay, now we are on to get F get C, which means again I'll ask quickly, anyone from the audience, F get C with the name, what will
Say
it be?
is function only.
Get
Character, sir.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't hear you. What did you say?
Say function character, like
Function character. Okay, like what will it do? I want to function character is okay, but what will it do? So it will get, right? It will get. It's reading the character from the file. Okay.
say it
Now
will
let's.
get the character, sir.
Yeah. Yes, that's what I was looking for. F get C. So F get C. F get C. Yeah. Okay. Now what we are going to do? Same again. The same codes. I want you to cram this in the mind literally, that this is the line that has to come in the front, and then this is the line which is line number 8. This is optional, obviously. It depends what kind of character you're using, but because we are using F get C, So as we are using S, which is string, so we need a string. So we have initiated a string which has a uh, length of 60. So that will try to print and see what has happened, right? Okay. So because my file.txt, which I showed you, which has written VR in 2012, uh, this will read this file as stated in the FP, and then it will check if it's null or not. If it will not check, the same process will show the error because it's not an null file. It will not show any error, and it will get the characters that are there, right? The strings that are there, right? So this is what it will do. Uh, so I think this is clear to you guys. Uh, Let me move to the next one. You can ask any doubt, any moment, not an issue. Okay, I think we are on the second last function, which is f get s. This is the string. This is the same. Uh, this is the one that I showed you in the beginning. Actually, this has a little different name with get c. So both of them do the same thing. The same output is going to come. The only difference is with the c and s. Okay, the character and the string. So one will print the character, the other will print the string. And the last will go to the f read, which is reading the entire document as I stated in the beginning. So let's see the code for f read. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I have, again, we start with the this main syntax that we have been using in every file. Then you're initiating a character where you're writing this sentence, which is actually a string format. Okay, and then what you're doing is you're opening the filing. You're actually using the f open function to actually remove what's there in the file.txt file, because w plus means we are reading and writing as well as deleting if there is something in the file.txt, right? So let's see if there is something in the file.txt. There's nothing right now, so nothing is going to happen a lot in that case. Let's see what is the code going to come out. So it will simply print because there was nothing, so it simply cleaned it and it just wrote uh, the string that I have given, right? So this is like it is going to read the entire document. Now the differences are simply that it will use a function like seek, which is actually going to uh, these are actually the function that you need to use specifically with f read, because you're reading the entire document. The other input out function used to just read the simpler they used to just read one section of the document. So you need to keep this in mind, okay, when you're using these f functions which are starting with f. uh, Before I end the session and go to the Q&A session, always remember to use this first line and then initiate, I mean, that means create the file and then use the correct mode, right? We made a small mistake in the beginning where I showed you how you can, uh, save yourself from making mistakes in terms of modes, right? So that's very important. And at the end is this uh, fread function with which you need to use fseek. Okay, so if you have any doubts, guys, you can take, else we'll end over here. Okay, any doubts? Great, no doubts.
If anyone has any kind of doubts, please raise your hand. We can clear it on the spot. I want to thank the speaker for taking out time for us and preparing such a nice presentation and clear all our basics.